Well, Mr. Grizzle, why don't you start talking about Grizzle Town a little bit and your memories of growing up there for a few years at least.
Sure. Well, I was born actually in Grizzle Town, May the 8th, 1947. Grizzle Town got its name from my grandfather, George W. Grizzle. He was born in 1890 in Cherokee County, and his family moved to South Bartow County, on area around Groover Landing Road, just north of Ackworth, and bought 40 acres there. He met his wife, eventual wife, Lula Pearl Biddy, who was born in 1900, and she lived in that area there. Mm-hmm. They met each other and courted for about 3 years, and they were married in 1915. And so they had 4 children that were raised in the Grizzle Town community there. And the reason it was called Grizzle Town is Granddad had built about 30 houses in that area and ran 2 stores there. And their children's name was W.T. Grizzle, William Taylor Grizzle, Lula Murtis Grizzle, Clyde Washington Grizzle, and George Talmadge Grizzle. My dad was George Talmadge. He was the youngest, mm-hmm. and I was the firstborn in his family. We had, I had 3 other brothers, and we all were born in the Ackworth area. I was born in Grizzle Town.
What year was your father born?
My father was born in 1928.
Was he named for Gene Talmadge?
Sir?
Was he named for Gene Talmadge?
I would imagine so. I would imagine so. You know, back then, they went with politicians. There's a lot of Washingtons in the Grizzle family, for instance.
Yeah, that's kind of the start of Talmadge's career, I guess, in statewide politics.
Exactly.
But he was getting to be a little famous for that time.
Well, now, one of the things, and what makes Grizzle Town so unique, obviously, it's cool that he had built some 30 houses there, but the thing is, he was a blind man. He at the age of 5 was cutting an onion sack open with a pocket knife, and gonna have an onion. That's what they would eat for between meals. And the knife came off the string, and it went into one of his eyes. Mm-hmm. It blinded that eye immediately, and they didn't have the medical attention that you'd get today. And so he lost sight in the other eye within 6 months. And so he was totally blind from age 5. His dad was a carpenter, and so rather than feeling sorry for him, he kept giving him chores to do, building little outhouses and things like that, and sheds and all around the place. And he got to where he could do real good with a hammer and saw. And he got a real keen sense of hearing, and he did real well. And so he learned to build houses, and he built those houses. He had Preacher Thompson was one of the men up in the Grizzle Town area that helped him build the houses. Now, I'm not saying Granddad subbed this out. He actually helped build the houses. He walked the rafters. And about the only thing he couldn't do was build the fireplaces. He had someone to build the fireplaces mm-hmm. for him. The house I was born in Grizzle Town was a house that he had built.
Mm-hmm. I guess when he was measuring a board, he would just go by a board that had already been cut.
He had his measuring devices.
Did he?
He did. He had a keen sense of. I have actually seen him, honestly, put his hands in a corner of a room and could tell you how out of square that corner is by feeling. Mm. When he got too old to build the houses and walk the rafters, he started a cabinet business, and he built kitchen cabinets until he was until he lost his sense of hearing, and that's when he just had to quit. But there are quite a few houses in the Ackworth area right now that's got his naughty white pine kitchen cabinets in there. He developed a routine of using a hammer and nail where he could, if you put your finger down and when he'd hit the nail, his finger would go down and touch the head of it, he'd move it out of the way and hit it again, and he could feel the depth of that nail, and he never would scar a piece of wood. He could nail it right down to where the head of that nail was flush and never miss a
You
thing.
ever hit his finger?
Never.
Never.
No, I never saw him hit his finger. You could go over there, what was so funny, you could go over there at night, and he'd be in there just sawing materials, and even with power saws, and obviously couldn't see a thing, and it just really
Doesn't matter
something to
whether it's
behold.
night or day.
It made no difference to him.
Wow.
He was such a special person.
Now, he also ran a store and counted the money.
He did. He had a way of keeping his paper money situated so he knew what it was and where it was.
Had one stack for ones. And
Exactly.
one for fives and
Right. And of course, the coins, there's no problem with it. He had, like I said, a keen sense of hearing and smell, and he could tell who you were. If he ever had seen you or heard you, or ever heard you, then he could tell you the next time you came in who you were. And make no bones about it, Grandma always said that he was the head of the household, and he was a remarkable man.
And did those skills go down to your generation?
Well, my dad, later on in his life, he built cabinets. Several of my cousins have built kitchen cabinets and things like that. I never got into it. I did too much staining of those cabinets from the inside when I was growing up. I didn't want any part of that.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your father. What did he do for a living?
Dad was born in 28, like I said, in Grizzle Town also, and he married my mother. My mother was Evelyn Davis. She lived over in East Cobb on Davis Road over there.
Sure.
She and Dad met, and I'm not real sure where they met at, but she moved up here and to Grizzle Town, where I was born, and Dad worked at Hole Proof for several years right after they first got married, and then he left there and went to work at Lockheed, worked there for about 10 years, and then about 1956, he opened up the Frosty Treat ice cream parlor and a hamburger joint just north of Ackworth, right at the Bartow County line, and that was a hangout for everybody. Everybody talks about the Frosty Treat back then. And he did that for several years and sold it finally after, I think, 5 or 6 years. And I was about 12 years old at that time. And he then went into landscaping with me. I was landscaping a little later on in life, but he went into that with me, and then also produced burlap for the nurseries over in Alabama for their burlap plants.
Okay. Now, let's see, you were born in 47.
Yes, sir.
Talk a little bit about what Grizzle Town was like you were only there, I guess, for about 4 years before you moved away.
It was, but because there were so many Grizzles there, the roots were so deep there. We were there every weekend, and so even my whole childhood, and even today, I still go through there quite often. But as a child, well, first of all, Dad had built me a pony ride. Mark's Pony Ride was right at the railroad tracks in Grizzletown, and back then, it was a real pony ride. Today, you go to a pony ride and the ponies are hooked up a bar and it goes around the circle. Well, it wasn't like that back then. You had an open corral. You jumped on that pony and it carried you where he wanted to go. And we had some pretty unique ponies back then, but we had a good time with that. Had fun playing ball. The Menners family, Gary and David Menners, Danny Owens, his grandparents were there. He was a cousin of mine. We all just played ball, played Army, just had a great time. Rode bicycles everywhere.
Did you consider that you're closer to Ackworth or Cartersville?
It was Ackworth. It was Ackworth mailing address, and I did all my running around in Ackworth.
Okay. Okay, so you were there your first 4 years, and then I guess the whole proof hosiery comes 51 to 53 when you moved into Marietta?
Yes, we moved down there for a short period of time, just off Fairground Street, and Dad just didn't like it down there. He wanted to go back to Ackworth.
Okay.
And so we moved back, and for a short period of time, we lived on McLean Circle.
What was that like?
It was a ball. My dad and Mom had a double wedding with Walter and Willadine Cox. And Mickey Cox, Mickey was born about 6 months before I was. And so we've been close all these years. We both had go-karts, and we rode those go-karts over on McLean Circle. His dad worked at Acme Lumber Company, and that was just up the street from there. And we'd go up to Acme Lumber Company and play in those sawdust piles up there, and there's a junkyard right above that we'd pilfer through things and make hot rods and things like that out of wood and putting the wheels on them, and just had a ball. Go to Old Daniel's store, and Jim Ship's service station was right there. We'd go over there and put coins on the railroad track and let the trains go by them and over them, and mash those coins out. Just fun things.
Yeah. And then you moved to McPhail Drive. Why was that?
They just wanted to move out of a new house, and so we moved to McPhail Drive. We went there in about 55.
Okay.
And
so you had been
we had
close
some.
to 8
I had
years
some.
old.
Yeah, well, I was, and I stayed there till I was about 12, 14 years old. And some of the best times of my life were right there. First of all, we had just a multitude of kids down there of our age. We had the Nelsons, Larry, Tommy, and Ricky, right behind us. Their property adjoined ours. My cousins, Enola, Leanna, and Rona, were right beside us. Danny Owens and his sister Diane and the family were 2 houses down from us. The Fuquays, Terry Terry and Phyllis lived straight across the street from us. Larry Woods and Evelyn lived 2 houses up from them. Jerry Kilgore, about a half mile from there. And then my cousins Lina and Mickey and Ronnie and Hilda were about a quarter of a mile from us. So we had enough people there. We played softball, we played baseball, we played football, we played basketball. And Larry and Jerry had motor scooters. And we'd run those motor scooters up and down McPhail Drive. Actually, we'd run them down and we'd have to push them back up. It was a dirt road and they wouldn't pull up it. But those of us that didn't have a motorcycle or a motor scooter, we'd put the old cardboard on the spokes of the wheels so they'd sound like a motor scooter anyway. Yeah. But one of the greatest memories, a couple of things happened down there. You could go to what they call Morgan Hill, which was a little bit south of North Cobb High School. Sure. And you could start at Morgan Hill and coast down. You could pedal down Morgan Hill and you could coast all the way to Proctor Creek, right down below Brooks Garage. And then we'd come up into Ackworth to the pharmacy and get us a milkshake and go home. And then another thing we did, a lot of people use the beach up here in Ackworth, and we went to the beach up here a lot, but we played in the creeks. Proctor Creek and Nance Creek. Yeah. We had a cable across Nance Creek down there, and a pipe on that cable, and you could take it and grab a hold of it and take a running go, and you could slide all the way across the creek. And we just have a ball. If you want to turn loose and get wet, then that was fine. Yeah. I can remember one time my cousin Lina and I went down, and I told her to just watch me, I'll show you how to do it. So I grabbed that pipe and I went across that creek and everything just worked perfect. And I threw the thing back to her and said, now you come on across. Well, she got to hold that thing and she made her run and go because she'd try anything. And she got about halfway and she couldn't make it. Well, she said, Mark, you got to help me. I can't hold on here. And I said, Lina, I can't help you, I'll get wet. So I said, just hold on. Well, I'll try to get you a stick or something to get a hold of it and pull you across. About a minute later, she hit the water, and all I could see was that blue coat and that head going under the creek. Mm-hmm. And she came back up. Well, I did have to go in and help get her out. It wasn't that deep. I mean, she could stand up in it, but she went all the way under. And it wasn't 30 minutes later that Uncle Jim had come down to get her to go back home for supper. And when he walked over there and saw us both soaking wet, and she told him what happened, he said some words that to me that I didn't know what they meant, and I had to go back home and ask Mom and Daddy what they meant. And they turned a little red face, so I learned a lesson there. But we had some good times like that.
Should have gotten wet and rescued it. You go to the Ackworth School, I guess. Then.
Yes, I did. Yeah, good times at Ackworth Elementary. We had the flats over there, obviously, where we played ball during recess, and you had the old section of the block building off of the lower grades, but then when we got into the higher grades, we had the old wooden buildings out to their own, and it was a fun place to go to school. I was one of the I was showing a badge that I had. I was one of the school patrols back then. You would. When you were a little older in grammar school, when you'd get out of class a little bit early, you'd stand at the bus and help the bus driver get the rest of the kids on the bus. And you'd count the names and make sure that everybody was on the bus. Mm-hmm. And then when you go down the road, if you cross a railroad track or something, the bus driver stopped, they opened the door, and you got off and looked both ways on the track and motioned the bus to come across the track, and you get back on and leave. And of course, you were about 11 years old doing that. I don't think you could do that nowadays.
Yeah. Okay, so now after that, let me think, am I missing a few years? You go to Old 41,
yeah.
Highway 293?
Yeah, my grandmother lived there, and she had some acreage, and Mom and Dad put a mobile home on the back of her property, and we lived there until I actually graduated from high school.
So this is north of Ackworth?
No, it's a little bit south of Ackworth. Yes, between Ackworth and North Cobb High School.
Okay.
It really wasn't. It wasn't a half a mile from Macphail Drive.
Okay. So you stayed there. You must have graduated from North Cobb High School.
I did. Graduated in 1965.
Okay. Did you play any sports or get involved in activities at North Cobb?
No, I tell you, I was growing up. I played baseball. I played Little League and Pony League and Colt League baseball. Uh-huh. Played a lot with Larry and Nelson, and so we had a bunch of us played together. Uh-huh. But as far as high school sports, I was a big 6'11", 120-pound guy that just. I just didn't have the frame to play football, especially in baseball. I did bowl back then and became a pretty good bowler. And
were you working while you were going to school, high school?
I did, yes. Actually, I got my first car when I was 17. Okay. It's '56 Ford, and but in order to get that car, I had to promise I'd pay for it, and. I got a job at Coates and Clark thread mill up here in Ackworth, and I worked a graveyard shift. Mm-hmm. So I would go to school in the daytime, come home, do my homework, go up there at 11 o'clock, get off at 7 o'clock in the morning, go home, get ready to go to school. And I did that my junior and senior year, paying for that car.
Much time to sleep.
It didn't give a lot of time, no. Oh, it didn't give a lot of time to play.
Right. Okay, so you said, you were saying before we started, you were in this first graduating class at Kennesaw. Were you there in the fall of '66 when it first opened?
Yes. So I went straight from high school into Southern Tech. I mean to Kennesaw Junior College when it was there.
So you were in the very first
graduating class of Kennesaw,
and the first class. Period.
Yes, because back then I was doing it at nighttime, night shift, and so I was taking full credit courses, but I was doing it at night, and so enjoyed that. That was fun. I went from there to Southern Tech, where the University of Georgia had a campus there at Southern Tech, and so I went through my junior year at UGA at Southern Tech, and then my senior year I went to Georgia State. Back then, it's not like nowadays. You could either be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, or a pharmacist. There's so many things now you can do, but back then I couldn't go to a pharmacy school or anything like that because I had gotten married in '68, and in '67, and we were moving on with our lives.
Yeah. Well, you were just. You may have been traditional age when you were going to Kennesaw, but you were very non-traditional in the sense that you're going at night school. You're married. You got a job and all those things.
Yeah.
That's the typical Kennesaw student. Wasn't
it? It was. Yeah, it really was. We it was a lot to do, but I left. I worked at Lockheed from 1965 to 1970, and in '70 I had an opportunity to come on board with Cobb County Fire Department. They were actually districts at that time, but they merged the districts in January of the latter part of January of '70, and so I became an employee of Cobb County Fire Department and retired from there some 29 years later.
Okay. So 70 to 89?
To 98.
To 98.
Yeah, 98, yeah. Sure did. I started out as an alarm operator. They didn't have any openings in the fire service, and Mike Beedenbaugh, our next door neighbor on Fernwood Drive, had suggested I try to get on as an alarm operator and then move into the fire suppression end of it. And that's what I did. I became an alarm operator and was that for about 3 years, and then went into the fire suppression side of it and went through the ranks of lieutenant captain, battalion chief, and eventually was deputy chief over support services right under Chief Hilton, who was the fire chief at that time, and then went back out in the field as a battalion chief and over hazmat until I retired in '98.
I'm trying to remember. It seems like Hilton was the first chief of the Cobb
He was.
Department because it was relatively newly formed at that time.
Exactly, just formed at that time, and he was an inspiration. He was one of the finest people I've ever worked with. He was a people person, and I can't say enough about David Hilton. I sure can't.
Well, you were kind of on the ground floor of a lot of things, like beginning of Kennesaw Junior College, beginning of the fire department.
Yes, yeah, we had. It was a lot of fun. A lot of good memories from the fire service.
And you had a growing family, if I've got this correctly. Adam was born in '68, about a year or so after you got married, and then Lori in '73.
Yes, that's right. We were living in West Cobb, and when Adam was born, and we moved to Fernwood Drive in December of '67, and December '68, and anyway, he was born in '68.
Okay.
And we moved up there, and Lori Ann was born 5 years later. And what was so fun, we stayed at Fernwood Drive for 13 years. And what was so unique about that they experienced the same kind of freedom that we did when I was growing up. Ackworth was just a great place for that. We had bicycles, they had motorcycles. That was the only difference. But he grew up with the Champion kids and the White's son, and so they had a lot of kids to play with, and so they just roamed the woods over there and with those motorcycles and had a ball. And
so they were going through Ackworth Elementary also.
They were, yeah. They both went to Ackworth Elementary and North Cobb, and they both still live in the Ackworth area here.
Okay. Now tell me about. I guess it should have been 1982 that you moved to the Rough home place.
Yes.
And That was a historic house there?
It was. It was. Well, first of all, we had lived at Fernwood for 13 years and had some great friends there. The Baxters had moved there. Ellen Waitsel and their son Chad. They were great friends of ours, and so. And the Beating Balls were there, and we really hated to move in a lot of ways because we'd had so many ties there. But we wanted some horses and wanted some land. It was a dream we had, and so we found this house. Most of the older homes were 2-story, and they were very difficult to renovate. This was an old Georgian style, single level, 12-foot ceiling house on 5 acres, and we were fortunate enough to actually. We went over and looked at it and said, yes, this is what we want. And we put a deposit on the house. And as we left, another couple was coming in the driveway to buy the house. That's how close we came to not getting this place. And so we bought it from, at that time, it actually belonged to William Hugh Ruff. William Hugh Ruff, his mother, Miss Carrie Ruff, and her dad, her husband had lived there. And we renovated the house, put a pop-up camper outside, and we got a gentleman from West Cobb that my wife had known, Mr. Clifford Cook, who said he'd come over and help us renovate it. And we started in one room, just went from that room to the next and renovated the whole house. And it was... It has been authenticated back to 1870, and I don't doubt that it doesn't go a little further back, but the county records were burned, and so it's hard to get a lot of information when you get back into the 60s, 1860s.
So where exactly is the house?
It is located 1 3/10 miles off of Mars Hill on County Line Road. It's an old white farmhouse, the way I say it, with a big barn out back. But it was a great place to be. We wanted horses. My wife had horses all her life. I had the ponies, so we were ready to get into something else. And first time, we hadn't been out there long. I'll tell this little story if we got time. Sure. First thing we bought when we got there was not a horse, it was a goat. Okay. And I had you can't believe all firemen. I had a lieutenant up at Station 11 that had goats, and he told us he had a goat that he guaranteed would stay in the pen. And so, Flopsy, it was a Nubian goat. And so we got this goat and put it in the pen out that was on the property there. And we went to pick up my daughter at school one day and came back, and that goat was missing. We hadn't been there a month. And we started looking everywhere for it, and went down the road about a quarter mile, and we saw some folks out, and it was the Barton family. We pulled in and introduced ourselves to them, and they to us, and we said, we're looking for a goat. He's missing. They say, well, we've seen that goat. And I said, you did? Where is it? We said, well, it was on top of my Mercedes. So Buster Barton is the gentleman's name, and fine folks, he and his wife, and Gene. And we told him, said, well, and he said, I got out there and tried to catch him, and he took off. I couldn't get him. Well, I said, if you'll just not do it, I'm so sorry about this, but let me go get my daughter, and we'll come back and we'll help you get him. Well, when we got back, Buster was sitting on the porch drinking some tea, and that goat was tied up over at the tree. Okay. And I said, my Lord, and Buster had scratches all over his legs. Oh, and she said, Buster, what happened? And he said, that goat would just get within about 2 or 3 feet of me, and I'd almost grab it, he'd take off, and he'd stop and look at me, and he said, I just decided I was going to get that goat before you got back. And so he said, I chased that goat all over the woods down there, but he said, I got him, and Gene was up here hollering the whole time, lasso him, Buster, lasso him. So, but that was how we met our first neighbors on County Line Road.
So the goat stayed in the pen.
Yeah, after that, until at least we could get rid of him.
Did you think the goat was going to mow the grass for you?
Well, we just wanted to have some kind of an animal to begin with, so we went from there to hogs, and like I said, then we got our horses in there, and we had some good horses over there. We had
Well,
some
you
fun
must
with
have
that.
liked the place if you've been there for the last 38 years.
38 years there, and my wife said we're going to be there another 38 if the good Lord lets us live that long.
Well, so that looks like that would definitely be National Register eligible.
We have, actually, the county has called us on several, and written us on several occasions wanting to put it on the register. And we're just, I really need to do it, I guess. I'm a little reluctant to do it,
You know, there's local registers and there's national register, and the national register is just honorary.
Yeah.
It doesn't put any restrictions on what you can do
Yeah.
with the property. So that'd be neat to get it on the national
it would be
register.
cool. It's a pretty place. We've entertained a lot. As a matter of fact, my granddaughters, we had what do you call a revealing of what the baby's going to be. She's expecting in June, and so we had a party there a couple of weeks back to determine. So we first time even for her to know what the baby was going to be,
Right.
and we had some 60 people in the house, and that just speaks for the size of that house. When you get 60 people in it like that.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned your wife a little bit. We haven't really said a whole lot about Paulette. I know before we got started on the interview, you were saying some mighty nice things about her. We might want to.
Well, I better say something about this. A good friend of mine, Tony Jones, up here in Ackworth, was going with a girl over in West Cobb, Connie Cook, and he asked me one day to ride over with him to her house, and I said, sure, I'll ride over there with you. And we stopped at Hill Brothers Service Station over on Dallas Highway, and come to find out that's where all the kids over there hung out. And we went over there 2 or 3 times, and over the course of a week or two, and I found out that actually Paul Hill and his brother Harold, they owned the station together. Paul and my dad had worked together for about 8 years at Whole Proof in Marietta. And so they had been friends, the family had been friends. I was just too young to even remember the kids getting together. Now, Paulette says she remembers me when they came to our house one time, jumping on the bed with a brand new cowboy suit on, and she thought I was really something with that cowboy suit on. But I finally got the nerve up to ask if I could come out and see the girls again. Linda and Paulette both were there at that time. Paul actually had 4 daughters. But when I knocked on the door and Paulette came to the door, well, I said, hey, man, I gotta make sure I get a date with this girl. She was a doll. And so, sure enough, I kept asking, can I come over, and we'd talk on the telephone. And I think Paul just felt sorry for me. He couldn't get real mad at me because he knew my dad. so he had to give way a little bit. So he finally let me start coming over there. And she and I went together for a year or better before we could even go out on a date. So I think we both realized that there was something there, and then that we wanted to keep this relationship going. And sure enough, we were married in 1967. She graduated from McEachern in 66, and so we got married in 67. And she went to cosmetology school and was a great hairdresser and worked for Woody's down in Smyrna. So I moved out of Ackworth then and went over to West Cobb with her for about a year while she was working down there. And we just wanted to come back to Ackworth. And so that's when we came back, and I had a new 66 GTO. We sold the GTO and used that for a down payment, and bought our first home on Fernwood Drive and lived there 13 years. And then, like I said, moved over. But the rest is history. And with the kids, they've done real well. And Adam, like I said, he went to Tech, and he wanted to be a pilot. And he was red-green colorblind, couldn't fly. So he said, well, if I can't fly them, I'll build them. And so he started off at Georgia Tech with an aerospace engineering degree. And a cousin of mine, Ron Reagan, I mentioned him earlier, Lina and Hilda, Aunt Murtis's oldest son, had a company in Hot Springs, Arkansas called ChemFab Corporation. And Ronnie came to the house one day when he heard that Adam was really interested in that and said, if you'll change your degree to mechanical engineering so that you can build parts for these aircrafts, he said, if you go to aerospace engineering, you'll sit behind the desk from now, and you don't want to do that. You want to build parts for them. And so he did that, and in order to do that, he had to come back to Southern Tech. And so he couldn't get his major changed at Georgia Tech. So he came back to Southern Tech, graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, and co-opted with Ron and his company in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and with Gulfstream in Bethany, Oklahoma, and Savannah, and opened up Grizzle. Opened up Aerospace Fabrications of Georgia in 1993, and it's really a successful business. He's got about 55 or 60 employees now, and he is one of the key players in manufacturing of parts for the United States in their military arsenal planes. He builds parts for just about, I guess, every military plane that's out there. Wow. And then Lori, my daughter, she loved kids, and so she went to Kennesaw and got her degree in teaching. And she's a teacher at Fry Elementary, doing a great job. Yeah, she loves those kids, and I'm really proud of her. She was the second one to go to Kennesaw. And then Molly, her oldest daughter, just graduated from Kennesaw, 4.0 grade point average. And she is a nurse at Erlanger and Chattanooga and the Trauma Center. Her other daughter, Darby, is a sophomore at Georgia College, and she's a softball player. She got a scholarship for softball, and she's going through their nursing program. Now, the children on Adam and Tracy, they have two children. Gabby, who is a sophomore at, I'm sorry, she's graduating this year at Kennesaw. And Everett, my only grandson right now, he has already been accepted at the University of Georgia. He graduates this fall, and they're reviewing him. He's really got some good scores. So I think he may wind up going to Georgia Tech. He wants to be a mechanical engineer. So I'm real proud of all of them. They've done real well.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about, I know you worked for the fire department for 29 years, but you were involved in a lot of businesses that had Grizzle in the name.
Yeah.
Those times. Grizzle Landscaping, you talked about landscaping a little bit earlier.
Yeah, most firefighters, we worked 24 on, 48 off, and everybody had a part-time job. Well, those part-time jobs quite often become full-time jobs, and this one did. We started Grizzle Landscaping in 1971. It was mainly a family organization. We did commercial and residential landscaping, and that's actually making the yards, not cutting grass, but laying the sod, et cetera. Sure. Both my brothers worked with me. As I said earlier, my dad worked with us and doing that for a while. We even opened a nursery for a short period of time. But we did that for 22 years. My wife, Paulette, she went with us. She worked with us. It was a family thing. My daughter, we'd put her in a playpen and put her in the yard. And my son at 6 years old, could pull a rake and smooth the yard out as good as any grown person could do. And so I think it really helped him. He's always said it really made him appreciate work and ethics of that. And so we did real well with that for 22 years. And I stopped because in 1985, about the time, 84, I had the opportunity to take on the position of deputy chief. Right. And so I had to go to an 8-hour day. And in doing that kind of put a stop to the landscaping business.
Sure.
And so that was a big choice to make, but I made one, and so and so we stopped that, and that's when she got started. She wanted something to do, you know. She didn't want to stay home, so she got started back into antiquing business, and so she started a little shop over in West Cobb, and but then she really got interested in it, and in 1996 we found her a building up in Talking Rock, Georgia, and she's got a 2-story shop up there now. She's had for 26 years, or we have had for 26 years, and she's got a heck of an antique and gift shop in Talking Rock that we operate.
And what is that the Hollyhocks?
Hollyhocks of Talking Rock, yes,
Okay.
And it's people come from everywhere to that place. She's got an unbelievable shop. She's just an unbelievable person. She's really good at what she does.
Wow. Now, what about Grizzle Enterprises?
Grizzle Enterprises was a thing we set up in 1996. It was a limited liability company that had 2 purposes. One is purchase property, and my son would lease that property from Grizzle Enterprises. That's just the structure, the way it was done back then. And it got also into, we did some sales of motorsports things, boats and campers, things like that for a short period of time through Grizzle Enterprises. But the last about 10 years, we have done mostly industrial tooling and all. And I say we, it's mostly me, I guess, and some help over there. But what it is, it's a good opportunity, a reason for me to be able to stay around Adam, and we have lunch every day, and he bounces things off me, I bounce things off of him, and so it works out great. And so Grizzle Enterprises has been a real success in that regard.
Well, it sounds like you stay busy all the
We
time.
do, yeah, we do.
Earlier, you talked about the influence of your grandfather on you. You also mentioned somebody else, Harold Gray Owens.
Yes.
Can you talk about how he had an influence on you?
Harold Gray Owens was as good a man as I guess you could ever be. He gave me my first job, a part-time job. He installed bathroom tile and tile flooring, and carpet, and things like that. And so I worked for him for $35 a week, I think it was, back then, the summer months in school. And he was a good Christian man, a good role model. We'd sing together, and he loved to sing. And we'd go to some of the nursing homes and sing. And he was just a super guy. And unfortunately, he died way too young from cancer. And but he was a good man, real inspiration for me. And of course, with Granddad, I always said, you know, if my granddad is blind and able to build houses and do the things he could, if he can do those things, I don't have any excuse for not being able to do anything I want to do. So it's just left up to me. So both of those were big inspiration for me.
Well, Ackworth has changed a lot in your lifetime. Could you talk a little bit about changes in Ackworth, and what does it still have in common with the way it used to be, and what do you think about Ackworth nowadays?
Well, I tell you, Ackworth, back then, there were 2 things I liked about Ackworth when I was growing up. One is the people. Well, everybody says this, I guess, but you know, it's true. The people here seemed like they knew everybody. They were friendly. They would you'd go back and forth, visit. You know, Mom would make a cake and go to a friend's house. We'd have cake, coffee, and they'd play cards, and everybody knew what the other person was doing. They looked out for each other. That's the reason why the kids could get out and play like they could. Everybody was watching those kids, you know, and it was just a great place for the people, and the town itself was just the right size. You had Main Street, and you had the 2nd Street where the city hall is here now, and you had the street across the railroad track, and you get, you know, a quarter mile out of the road down, then it's just little stores. And so it was just a perfect place. There was just enough for the kids to do, but it was a safe area. It didn't have a lot of crime that I was ever aware of. We had a pool hall here and played pool and rode bicycles and stay out till dark and go home. We'd get on a Greyhound bus. Back then, you could get on a Greyhound bus on the side of the road, just thumb it down, and we'd get on a Greyhound bus and go to Marietta to the Strand Theater and come back in the evenings at 12, 13 years old. But Ackworth was just a great place. And then it went through a period of time there as we got a little older that the businesses started to slow down a little bit, and it got a little stagnant here, and wasn't nothing much going on up here. And over a period of time, there was some transition of things, and I can understand why some of those folks that had been working all their lives, they didn't want to invest their retirements into something else. They were ready to retire and enjoy. But now these businesses have reopened, and it's thriving again, and I'm just thrilled to death at what's going on up here. And not just us, you hear a lot about Ackworth now. It's a beautiful town. We frequent the restaurants up here, and I like what's going on. I like what's going on with this Save Ackworth history. Being in the antique business, obviously, I like old, and I like those kind of things. But I'm just proud of the way the people up here are doing. And one of the folks that used to work up here, I think, with the mayor here, is now a city manager for the city of Jasper, just north of Talking Rock. And big things are happening up there now, the same way. So you got some people with some good ideas, and I'm glad that the people that are living here are supporting them. But I will say now, it's kind of strange to see all those senior citizens places down in that hole down there across from Jones Tire Company.
Right.
I never thought I'd live to see that. But I may be there one day. So I'm glad it's up here. I'll still be in Ackworth then. There's no better place to be, I'll tell you.
Well, I'm about out of questions. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and you got a very impressive career and very impressive family, it sounds like.
Well, thank you.
And
good Lord's blessed us.
well, appreciate your support for the Save Ackworth District Foundation.
Thank you.